Robert and I are having a little bit of fun. Robert Imbeault is on my. Let's start that again. It's just getting silly now. Thanks for showing up today, everyone. Robert Imbeault is with me. He is the author of the book Before I Leave You, and we're going to just have a little conversation here. I'm grateful that Robert's spending the time with us today, and I'm grateful that you're here too. Hi, Robert. How are you?
Hi, Kevin. I'm good. Great. Thanks. How
Yay.
you doing?
Can I call you Rob or Robert? What do you go by?
Rob mostly.
Yeah, I thought so. Rob, it is really important for me to start with something very personal. Personal for me, something you and I have in common. I'd like to talk about tattoos. I have this essence of when I see someone's tattoo, it doesn't matter if I'm in a local store, someone's cashing me out at the price chopper. If I see someone with some ink, I'll literally, say, "Hi, how are you?" And "Good, how are you?" And I'll say, "It's really nice ink." The reason I mention it is because I know that for me, when I was in active addiction, people expected me to have a lot of tattoos. People expected me to be a lot of different things. I had my two earrings and things like that. People don't know what to do with me these days. I'll start a job or maybe meet people in a casual situation. And maybe in the wintertime, like now, I'll have the long sleeves on. And then the spring comes or the summer. And I'll just be with those same people who have known me maybe for weeks or months or even years. And I'll reach out to grab something. And as I reach out, they'll say, "Kevin." And I'll say, "Yeah." And they'll, "You have a tattoo?" And then they'll do this. "Can I see it?" And they'll start looking at my tattoo and they want to know where it came from. Do I have any more? And I say, "Well, yeah, I have one on each shoulder and one there." And they say, "You do?" And I say, "Yeah, I have an entire dragon on my back, and then it wraps around my back leg, and there's a right." See, you get that. And then they say, "Really?" And I say, "No, I have a bird and a butterfly." Tell me about. You don't have to tell me about the tattoos. I love the ink that you have. It's very, it's sublime, and I've looked as closely as I can through the pictures that I've seen online. But who we were and who we are isn't always. We can't take it at face value, and you're getting to know me. I'm getting to know you. Do you ever have that experience with other people where they just recognize one person and then later just discover a whole nother person? And of course, maybe these will be people who haven't read your book.
Yeah, I definitely have people in my past who knew that, happy-go-lucky drug user, partier, always fun to be around. And I've kept a few of those gems as friends, which, I'm hugely grateful for. But a lot of them kind of shed away. So the ones that knew me before, they kind of like, who is this guy? And then they read the book and you were actually this guy, which makes me really sad. But now you're this guy, you're a family man and you love your wife and your kids and you're a good friend. So like they've seen that metamorphosis and they're very much a part of it. Um, when people that don't know me and if I'm sleeveless or short sleeves and I have tatted up both arms, I can feel the looks. I mean, I live in a pretty conservative city in Ottawa, so our nation's capital. But I love my ink. The stuff that you can see normally is all the stuff that I've gotten post recovery, and they mean they mean so much to me. And I love every stitch. There are pieces of ink that I didn't like and that I got on the downward spiral, which I'm gonna probably cover up at some point. So it's funny how that is. It's funny you mentioned because as soon as you sat down, I'm like, oh, he's got a tattoo too. I'm like, oh, I'm like, all right, cool. I'm like, I was hoping we'd actually talk about it. But you and I
We didn't
talked so
plan this,
much when
people.
we
We didn't plan this. I swear to goodness, we didn't plan this. This was I wanted to throw him a little curveball, but he saw it coming.
that's no, that's great. But you and I talk so much, we never get to the stuff we want to talk about sometimes, it seems.
Truth be told. I'm going to turn to a little bit more of a serious subject, and I will ask our viewers to be prepared. These will be what we call trigger warnings. There will be talk about child sexual abuse and, of course, addiction, and we'll probably veer into some other topics. And when I was very young, I was abused. It's in my book, and there's a story about how I discovered that. But when I was abused, I didn't know I was abused. And it wasn't until much later in life, actually, after I got in recovery, that through some therapy, I was even introduced to the idea that something might have happened to me. Something might have happened. And I said, no, nothing ever happened. It was, we could call it a repressed memory, but I think there was just a disconnect, a misunderstanding between how a child should be treated. And I remember driving down, the reason I'm bringing this up is I remember driving down the road that night after that therapy, literally driving past us, on a street that I'd gone down 100 times. I said, yep, here I am. I'm coming up to the S curve, and there's the silo that I used to play in when I was a kid. And yep, there's the house where I was molested. Wait, what? What was, and it had been a 4-H leader. And I remember your line, and I have to remember it is, it's like the trees we pass on a train. And I wanted to talk to you about your deeper understanding of how long did you have an awareness? You call it peripheral. Mine was almost, it was actually right in my face. I just didn't know what it was. I wonder if there's a difference in how we evolved to understand how that abuse happened, what it means to us, and how we manifest it now.
I think that's why we're so aligned. That I hesitate to use the word repressed because I knew something was there the whole time, but I never acknowledged what it was. And it's funny because looking back, you see the reasons for my behavior, my aggression, my addictions, my whole life. And it wasn't until my life was cushy and should have been happy and I should have been on top of the world where it said, okay, brain, you're old enough to deal with this now. And it came back, and it was like I lived with a memory that was kind of like I describe it as a blurry photograph. But one night it hit me as a high definition, full length feature film. And I saw, I tasted, I smelled, I felt every inch of that. And it just hit me all at once. It was really a boulder on my head. And I was catatonic for a few days. And then the process to accept that it was real, and I imagine you were very, very much similar, is now you have to reconcile with your belief. I'm like, okay, is this my brain making it up? And you try to talk yourself out of it. And I did so much of that. And I didn't seek therapy right away. I went one way, and I just sort of, I left my wife, and I started down the road of suicide, essentially. And I began writing what turned into the book as a secret goodbye. It was a suicide letter. But I love writing, and writing became a therapy. And I think that's when branches of healing took hold. So, and that was part of a therapy. Then real therapy was therapy that helped me draw out what those memories were and why it was a blurry photograph for so long, right? Our young minds just don't understand why we were treated this way, and then why someone else didn't save us from it. Like there's just, it's so deep and it's so complicated and intertwined. And I'm glad you said the happiness disclaimer. It is very triggering. And yeah, I say it in all my interviews, the happiness disclaimer. I'm here, I'm happy, I'm living a life full of joy and gratitude. So and it's in this position that I'm able to help now.
Yes, the interesting thing that you said is that why we align so well, and it is interesting because I actually was in therapy. I was 2 years, maybe a year and a half, 2 years, somewhere along that lines, into my recovery process from the addiction and the alcoholism. So I was moving along in a healthy direction, and yet I still felt awful about myself and couldn't figure out why. And you were at a different place when you wouldn't use the word discovered, but when that came to pass. And you felt like a boulder. I felt like what's that? It was almost like like you said, and that's why I love the phrase, like the trees I pass on the train. It was just, what is that? I couldn't reconcile it until next week. And I remember having professional help was very helpful. The help was helpful. And I was able to say, can I ask you something? And she said, sure. And I said, when I was, I think around 9, I was in 4-H, and of all of us boys, and I laid it out. And I said, and this happened. I said, what was that? I didn't know. I didn't have words for it. I didn't have a definition. And then I explained to her some other instances of rape. But I didn't have the word rape. I didn't have the word gang banged. That's another very strong phrase. Uh, so I didn't have those words. I didn't have that understanding. But having that come into me at first seemed like I can't, like you said, I can't reconcile this. But I'm going to trust that there's something here that I can not grapple with and surpass, but I can start to maybe just meditate on. Just really start to think, what do I do with this?
It's a very tough thing to reconcile when you have this paradigm of your life, and then you take those harsh words, those rape, those gangbang, those abuse, and you place it in context of your life, and it just doesn't work. And the only way to do that is to be vulnerable, all right? And like I don't know how I was able to be vulnerable, but I know in therapy it allowed me to deal with better with that. So being vulnerable was a huge step in accepting those words in our context, you know. And they are harsh words. They're really harsh words, and because they just bring so much baggage with them. And you know, people tread lightly, but just like suicide is an important word. Like we both taken the course, right? Like the suicide prevention course, and like if someone presents to you, someone, you know, a friend of mine mentioned last week, yeah, he was sad and he's thinking of this. And I said, listen, are you thinking about suicide? I'm sorry, I have to say the word because that's what we have to do. And it led down to, I don't know. And then, okay, well, you know, let's talk. Let's get you, a person. I have a great therapist and everything's online now, so I can hook you up, you know, we have to use these words, even though how harsh they are.
I do agree. There's these words that we use and how we use them and when we use them and why we use them is important. I think that there's a shock value that people might use the words for to try to get someone's attention or maybe just to get, you know, attention for themselves. And I'm not criticizing, I'm just simply saying that's not really effective. I think the way you were asking the questions, and I have it. I have it almost in my family dynamic now with my children and my wife, and they can ask me that. We've kind of gotten to the point where it's like saying, "Did you eat well today? You know, have you how'd you sleep last night?" Right? We want to make it not so we demystify it. I don't want to demystify suicide or sexual abuse or addiction. I want to reduce the stigma. I want it to be not that it's an easy conversation, but it's a more likely conversation. And you've just folks, if I'm going to look right into the camera, if you haven't taken a chance to read the book, you're going to want to, because it is very helpful and was for me very instructional, but also life-changing in a hopeful and an inspirational way. So that's my little plug for Rob's book. I think it's really changing the world, and that's the whole point. I do want to ask you about something. Say that again.
And proceeds are going to a men's group here.
Tell us about that really briefly.
So in therapy, my therapist ran a men's group, and she wanted me to take part in it, and it took me 7 years. But by the time I signed up, it took almost a year to get into one because it wasn't funded. So that's where the money is going, because I couldn't, like, I was in a good place because of therapy. And the men's group has been incredible. These guys are incredible guys, super brave. And anyways, but some of them were on the edge, and thinking that some of these guys had to wait a year, it just breaks my heart. So that's what it's going towards funding.
The thing that I wanted to tie that to also is how you said how important it was to be vulnerable and how difficult that is to do. And it's extremely impossible, I would say. It would probably be impossible unless it's maybe just improbable to try to be vulnerable alone. I can, be vulnerable, I guess, in a room by myself and talking to myself, or maybe with, as some people would phrase it, a higher power, some external. But I found the vulnerability to be only possible with other people. And in community, like you and I are now, and people that are watching this video, you're actually in community with us right now. And I think that's where we can start to grow and practice knowing that being vulnerable is possible and we won't always get hurt. I had to find someone in my life. His name is Richard, and he's been with me for almost 35 years now as someone very close to me. And it was very difficult to trust men especially. And that's what I think that I could really tell you that was the demarcation point for my growth in that vulnerability that allowed me to start to be more vulnerable and understand that being vulnerable didn't mean that I was going to have to be, and again, strong phraseology, but I didn't have to be a piece of meat. I didn't have to be someone who could just give his body to anyone, anytime, anywhere. And I didn't have to be someone who abused himself. You talk about low self-worth. You talk about the depths of self hatred. And I know for me, I felt that way. I felt that seemed to be no bottom to my lack of value, right? There was a zero, but there was less than zero. There was a below zero. I think that you understand that, and you've written about that quite eloquently. And that juxtaposition with who we are today, and that person who practices metta, that person who eats right, that person who sleeps right, that person who wakes up in the morning and gets on a podcast, an interview like this, and has his bright-eyed and bushy tails going, and then says, "Wait a minute, I got to go answer the door," and we're laughing and we're having all this wonderful moments, and you're telling me about the cat and the neighborhood, and how do we get these full lives, and not just appreciate them, but internalize them? You've had a real path of self-discovery on that and healing, and I want to hear about that a bit.
I mean, I will go back to, regurgitate the vulnerability. I think being vulnerable as a man has that extra layer of boys don't cry, that whole masculinity problem. I don't think all masculinity is bad. Don't get me wrong. That's a whole thing. But I think that could prevent being vulnerable, but being vulnerable is a superpower. And you let your guard down, and you let your guard down between yourself. You want to look closer, and it's Yeats that says it's braver to look at the darkest corners of yourself than it does for a soldier to fight on a battlefield, right? It's to look at your dark corners and own them and fix them, and then you can be vulnerable with anybody, right? You're truthful, you're vulnerable, you're like, okay, yeah, I was a piece of shit, got it, check. Guess what, I'm no longer that. And I did this thing recently where I talked about my affirmations, and I have a gratitude journal, and I write down I love and respect myself. And when I started doing that, I thought it was the cheesiest, stupidest thing. I'm like, I love and respect myself. And then I sat, because I'm writing in cursive and it's in my face, and I'm like, I don't. And then that turned into, well, why don't I? I'm like, well, maybe I could be a little kinder to my friends. Maybe I could be a little kinder to my mom. Right? Maybe my thought process isn't really working. Get to go back to your Buddhist practice. Maybe you're not meditating enough. And then all of a sudden, I do love and respect myself. I do love and respect myself as a husband, as a father, as a friend, meeting new friends like you. I do that. And when each time I write it down now every day, it's an audit. Like, okay, do I still? Yeah. Okay. I think I still do. Can I do more? Yep. Well, let's do more. So, I mean, there's a lot of those tips and tricks. I don't particularly like the word hack. I think you do the work. You've been doing it for 35 years. You do the work, right? And it could be step by step. And it could be, and I described this, I think I said this in the book, where you take one step forward and, oh shit, I took 5 steps back. Then you forgive yourself, and you take one step forward. Maybe this time only 3 steps back, and you forgive yourself, and then you have momentum.
There's an important dynamic to the gratitude list that I've often enjoyed, and it's just exactly the way you're articulating it. And I say it maybe with my own words, is that I don't just write the things down that I'm thankful for. I want to have a measurement of my gratitude. How do I identify that I'm living in gratitude, not just that I'm grateful in this moment? And I love your measurement. You said an inventory, I think. I think that was the word you used. Audit. Yes, audit. So yes, that's your business sense. You do audits, I do inventories. But I'm just looking at things on a shelf. But no, I'm just kidding. The understanding that I don't just want to have a list of things that I can say, yep, I'm a happy guy. Look at what I have. I want to know, am I living in gratitude? And the way I know that is, what have I done for other people? What have I done for my wife, for my children, for my puppy, for goodness sakes? How have I taken care of that 13-and-a-half-year-old dog that's deaf and is, maybe in the last year of her life or two? Am I really spending time with the world around me? Am I paying attention to the trees in the backyard? I mean, whatever it means to have a gratitude list for other people, I think the idea is, am I grateful? How do I measure that? It's about how that I'm approaching the world around me in a caring and loving. And the big word is, and this is the one that I like that you practice, is a kind way. Loving kindness. It's one thing to be loving, right? I love you, but I can be loving and not be very kind sometimes. I can be kind and not loving, but loving without kindness is awfully confusing for other people because they see that I love them, but yet I'm either grumpy or raising my voice or ignoring, not listening well. So talk to me about loving kindness, because then I want to go into one other thing, which is something I call the non-negotiables in life. And your meditative process is one of them. Talk to me a little bit about the loving kindness, the metta.
Yeah, the meta. It's there's a great line by Sharon Salzberg that the whole new self-help industry is everyone tells you to love yourself, but nobody tells you how. And reading her book and really getting into Sharon Salzberg is a meditation teacher. She has several books. I think Real Love is her most recent, and she has the practice. I don't know, do you want me to get into the actual practice? I mean, for me, it is the practice of thinking of someone you love and wishing them well in various ways, and then someone you don't know very well and wishing them well. And then you get into people that you have difficulty with, and you meditate and wish them well and sincerely wish them well. And that evolved from people I would have trouble with would people at work that that annoyed me, and then it turned into maybe my sibling pissed me off that day, and then it turned into kind of my dad because it's kind of been there for years and years, and then one day it was just okay. Well, it was the man who raped me, and I have to wish him well, and you can't right away. I couldn't right away. It took me months, and an interesting caveat is that if you cannot wish that person well, you turn it back on yourself. You wish yourself well because you're the person who is healing right now or is hurting. And that process, it's amazing. You do it every day and you interact with these people and you go to the checkout counter. You're like, oh, I wish may you be safe, may you be happy, may you be healthy, may you live with these. And it just makes you happier, right? It's a self thing, and the interactions, because you're in the back of your mind, you're like, oh, I wished you well, and and it just changes your whole connection on this side, and I think that is picked up. That energy is picked up, right?
Well, I
Same
think
as you connect with tattoos, right? You're like, oh, we have a connection now. Let's talk tattoos.
what I hear you talking about a bit, and I think I'll use just, it's a practice, and the practice becomes more innate and more habitual would be a good word, I think. But then eventually, how it manifests itself is almost, to me, so someone like me, which I can say someone like us, it's surprising. I think I look at the world around me, and I don't want to be critical of anyone that's on social media or in the media or anything, but there's a lot of ways that people respond, and I'm very prone to get a Facebook message or a Twitter DM that pokes at me that says I didn't like when you said something that makes my instincts question who I am, what am I doing, and then sometimes my impulsive reaction is to fight that, to get back. And I've learned, just as you saying, I wish them well is the first thought that I have. I thank them for just even communicating with me. I may not like what you're saying, but I like that you're here with me. I really appreciate that we're spending time, even if we're not quite on the same page. It's just a real magical manifestation of this kindness. And the word kindness has been really, really important to me for the last 2 years. Someone said to me once, and I don't take it on as a moniker, they said, Kevin, you're the epitome of kindness. And I said, whoa, that's a heck of a lot to live up to. And but my name, Kevin, actually in Gaelic, one of the definitions is gentle and kind. So it's a fun thing for me to grapple with from a namesake. But I've taken that on as a daily understanding of who I really do want to be. And the new word that came up just 2 days ago when I had the book launch on Tuesday, 3 days ago, is the word generosity and being generous. And that's the manifestation, I think, of the practices you're putting in place. And it's absolutely wonderful. I'm going to wrap up in a second here, but there are things in my life that are non negotiables. There are things that I do. One is the vulnerability you talk about. I have a relationship with other human beings, and of course, I cannot be raw and bleeding in front of everyone. People will throw salt on me, but I have a community. I have a community, and I have a gathering of men and women, and older and younger, who I value in my life, and I'm very, very prone to saying I need to talk to you, and they can hear the tone in my voice. They say, okay, go. And that is a practice of mine, but it's a non-negotiable, because I find that when I pull back from that and I start to really protect myself again, I'm not in a protective cocoon. I'm in a defensive mode, and I need to be open and vulnerable. There's other pieces of my life that are non-negotiables. There's a meditative practice and a spiritual practice. The biggest one is service. Being of service to others is really. You seem to have some. I'm going to use the word non-negotiables. You don't have to, but there are things that you've found that really. I don't want to use the word work, because you use the word work, but it's not like they work as if I do something and I get back what I deserve, but these are the pieces of my life that I don't want to give myself a lot of wiggle room on. I will forgive myself when I don't meditate maybe in a timely manner. I'll forgive myself when I maybe don't live up to my value of how to be of service. But I'm going to keep plugging away and keep these right in the line of sight. Are there those pieces? And I want you to share with the audience, because it doesn't have to be for other people, but it's important to know that we can all find these things and they can change our lives.
I've my ritual, my morning ritual has evolved so much, especially having two young children. It's kind of forced the issue, but and at one point it was like 2.5 hours in the morning, because I was doing Wim Hof, and I was doing obviously gratitude and affirmations. I'd write down my Buddhist prayer, and it's all for one intention. And I'm not saying it all quote unquote works or doesn't work. I think people can pick what works, what works for them, for lack of a better word. Um, I think the meditative or yoga or something spiritual, it's just something, it's a time to breathe in the morning, every morning, because I can center myself and I'm present. And first thing in the morning, I'm up with my daughters. So I want to be present, right? I try not to blink in the morning. But when my wife wakes up, I have my time. I'm like going, and it could be 20 minutes, it could be an hour. And I'll go meditate, I'll go do yoga, and I'll just chill. And then I can just take a deep breath, come back, and I'm more present once again. I take that throughout the day. It's funny, you said you needed to be you. That's a big thing for me. Like, to be someone that's constantly kind, constantly generous, even if people want to take advantage, that doesn't affect me, because I'm being me, right? If you're taking advantage of me, that's shame on you, not me, right? And I'm not going to let that change me into something that I don't aspire to be. So I think it's like, call it knowledge of self, right? You really need to know who you want to be. And that I struggled with that for such a long time. I didn't know what values were. I didn't have the practice of writing down, okay, what's the type of person I want to be? What's the type of person am I now? And how, what are my milestones? I'm back in the business brain, but what are the milestones? What's the path? The path of most resistance, right? To get to where I want to be. And once you get there, you own it. I can't change anything. So I honor everything that's happened in my past and got me here. So yeah, I think there's a lot of those. There's a lot of non-negotiables. I think knowing my values now is first and foremost. And if friends don't honor that, then I wish them well. And but if they're not sharing my values, and then, maybe we have to part ways. But I'm always here. Mm.
Right. We may have to part ways, but I do understand the phraseology of attraction. There's a real way that I look at my life is that I may not be attractive to you right now. And that doesn't mean that I'm of less worth. It just means where you are is not you're not attracted. Where I am, where you are is we're not attracted at that point. And I've noticed that there are times when I'm attracted to someone else and they're not attracted to me. And I'm talking about a spiritual attraction. I'm talking about an emotional, mental, spiritual, not, of course, could be physical in general, but that is sometimes the most surprising for me because that feels like no, 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 I want. And what I really recognize sometimes is, just because I have an attraction towards someone's spiritual life or their essence, doesn't mean that they have to reciprocate. And that I used to battle with that. It used to make me feel bad, like what's wrong with me? And then I recognized there's nothing wrong with me. And then I could be where I was and they could be where they were. And that allowed me to have the ability not to be attracted to everyone else either. Just because someone is really wanting my attention or attracted to me doesn't mean that I have to reciprocate. I don't have to be, it's not a one-to-one, right? It's a one-to-many, many times. Wonderful, wonderful time to talk to you today. And you can tell why now this is just in conversation with. This is just two people chatting away. I hope that folks spent some time today, with us. Just understand that it's just two guys that are trying to figure it out on our own in community. And we hope that you'll join us again. And Rob, thank you so much for spending the time today. It's really been wonderful.
No, thank you. Thank you for this. And thank you for your show. This is awesome. This is a great idea. Your conversation. Sorry, not a show.
Right. Thank you. Yes, we'll continue. I'm sure we'll do it again someday in the future.